first and foremost, I want to really offer an idea that confidence and self-worth are not things that you have or you don't. They are skills that can be worked on and practiced um, to be able to build it up. So,
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who might be struggling or wondering, or in that gray area of uh, having confidence and feeling like as if they are worthy, understanding that
really good in high school and getting
You feel on top of the world.
I can always make excuses.
That applies both for
health to kind of
what fun is it if we all looked at
that path, don't have your friends.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the Mental Wellness Show. This is exciting. This is a brand new series we have going on. Bri, I was going to ask you this before we started the show, but how do you pronounce your last name?
Tartaglione.
Oh, okay, Tartaglione.
That's it, right there.
Okay. We have Miss Bri Tartaglione joining the show. Thank you so much, Bri. You're our first guest who's been remote like this. We've done all the past shows live in person, so this is exciting. This is brand new. So Bri, welcome, and I'm just gonna talk a little bit about you, Bri, and you can kind of tell us your story from there. So, you're a certified school counselor. You have a dual master's in school and psychology counseling. You're a podcaster. You're a confidence coach. What aren't you, Bri? Did I miss anything? And if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into all that.
Yeah, so well, it all definitely started with counseling. So I went into counseling. I got my degrees finished in 2019. And then that was where I really felt pulled into school counseling. But this is 2019, then 2020 happened. As 2020 happened, actually, and I will make this brief. If we want to go into it more, we can. But I had a very serious and unexpected medical experience that happened on March 17th of 2020. So as the world was literally shutting down,
Right.
so was my body essentially. That medical condition that I found, I have a very rare condition. It rendered me paralyzed for
Oh,
several
wow.
weeks. And I didn't know if I would ever walk again. Essentially, my
Wow.
life got flipped on its head a year after I became a counselor. And I found that I sort of became client zero for myself of this next phase in my life. How do I get through this? What if
Right.
my life is forever changed? What are the next steps from here? So from there, that's really where everything spiraled. So I started a podcast. I really wanted to be able to share my story, what happened there. And I realized that I sort of therapized myself through that experience, like I said. So I wanted to be able to sort of fuse my personal experience with my knowledge in counseling and psychology. And that was the inception of the podcast.
Wow.
I then really kind of found out from there, people started really leaning into me for advice. It was almost like people were looking for a school counselor in life,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because it's like a little bit of, therapeutic, deep counseling with a little bit of coaching. So that was really where I started then speaking and starting the coaching practice. So from there, and at this point, sometimes I say confidence coaching or emotional wellness coaching. They're very intertwined. Mental health education in general is a huge part of
Mm-hmm.
it. So that is kind of the very abbreviated version of how everything came into play for me.
It's pretty amazing how we can come from, like you said, COVID, and then you had this rare medical condition, how we come from like a low like that to out of that, like the phoenix rises, like you start this podcast, you build this community, and you start to help out lots of other people. It's just really, it's such a cool thing to hear and see stories like that. So I think it's really cool that you're into that. And again, I appreciate you coming on here. I do have a quick question. So I'd like to ask everyone on the show this: when did like mental health when did you first realize mental health was like a thing in your life, and you had to kind of take care of your headspace?
Oh, what a great question. If I'm being as transparent as possible, I actually wished I had learned sooner. For me, in the same way that I kind of counseled myself, so to speak, through that medical experience, I didn't really lean into mental health practices until I really started to study them. So this was really in somewhere between 2016, 2017. So when I started grad school in 2017 to go to school for counseling psychology, that was actually when I really realized the power of mental health and mental health
Mm-hmm.
practices. Prior to, it was something that I was more so interested in, and I found had profound benefits for the students that I was working with in at that time. So I worked with students for a very long time. I was working in education for a very long time, and I worked specifically in a learning center inside a middle school in Boston. This was before I went to grad school. So this was 2014 to 2016. And that's where I really started to understand that um, mental health was, in fact, something to be looked at and
Mm-hmm.
taken care of. Again, before that, to me, it was something of a buzzword. I didn't realize if I was
Right.
doing it or not. Maybe it was just unconsciously, because I definitely always tried to make sure I was in a healthy headspace, but I didn't know what it was or what it was called. But when I started working with
Right.
these students in this learning center, it was a social emotional learning center. So I was actually, my students, my middle schoolers were definitely the first round, so to speak, for me to really understand, what mental health is, how it
Mm-hmm.
impacts someone. And I got to watch that and be a part of that firsthand. And that's what really pushed me into becoming a school counselor at the time. So then I started studying psychology, understanding more about mental health, understanding more about therapy. And then
Right.
obviously it's become a rock in my life at this point.
Yeah, that's so great, and it's probably a silly question, but I just thought about this yesterday. I'm like, do psychologists and people who have gone to school for counseling, do they go see a counselor themselves? And I'm sure if you need it, you do. But I'm just kind of curious, like, is that something regular that you still do, or do you learn enough where you can kind of keep yourself like regulated? How do you go about that?
It's such a great question. I remember it was day one or two, maybe. um, Going to grad school, our advisor said, "You're all becoming therapists. You need to see a therapist as well." And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember all of us, we kind of looked around because we were like, okay, tell us more. You're
Yeah.
not giving us a ton of detail. But I mean, the power of seeking therapy and going to therapy um, is in the same way that you might seek a personal trainer for physical health.
Right.
So, though there are ways to work on your physical health on your own, in the same way, there are ways to continue to work on your mental health on your own. Seeking therapy and going to a therapist, for therapists specifically, and I'll answer that question first, is sort of twofold. The first is that we are all humans. And often people who want to become therapists do it because there's some type of um, resonating.
Mm-hmm.
They might have been through something themselves. I say we might have been through something ourselves that um, recognizing that there's still that human element. So I'm still a human
Right.
behind my therapeutic lens. The second is that in therapy, when you're working with clients, you are taking in a ton of really personal, sensitive, confidential, difficult information,
Mm-hmm.
ton of it daily. So to be able to sort of be the keeper of such sensitive and difficult, or sticky information, could be the word that I use, um, that that can feel very, very draining as well. It's not that the practice of being a counselor or a therapist is draining. It's just that we, like anyone else, also need that outlet, especially with the intake of all that information.
Right. Right. It makes sense. And when I thought about that question yesterday, I'm like, therapists are humans too, they
Mm.
go through the same similar stuff that anybody else who's in any other field goes through. So, of course, they would probably need it as well when they need it. So, but I just thought it was an interesting question. But Bree,
Great
thank
question.
you so much for sharing about your story. And today's episode is going to be all about confidence and self worth, self awareness, self development. So, I'll go ahead and ask you questions. So, what advice can you offer someone who might be struggling with self worth or confidence right now?
There's so much I could offer. I could talk days, weeks, months about this. But first and foremost, I want to really offer an idea that confidence and self worth are not things that you have or you don't. They are skills that can be worked on and practiced um, to be able to build it up. So,
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who might be struggling or wondering, or in that gray area of uh, having confidence and feeling like as if they are worthy, understanding that you can get there. And it's so important to sort of offer that building block first, because I know that a lot of people might come into to the thought about confidence and worth specifically and think that it's something that you might be born with and can't understand that it's something that can be practiced. But confidence, actually, by definition, is trust in. So self confidence is immense or intense trust in yourself. And so understanding and breaking down the definition in that way sort of opens up this realm of possibility. How can we learn to trust ourselves more? And when we have that trust in ourselves, that will then begin to build that worth. You
Mm-hmm.
start to understand and practice that self worth when you start to trust in yourself, that you can and that you will and that you are, or that you can be and that you will be, or that you are being. So there's so much to offer around that, but the first line of advice that I always offer is recognizing that this is not something that you do or don't have, that you are either born with or not born with. This is something that can be practiced, worked on, built, and grown to the place that you want it to be. So I like to offer that ray of light first when that question comes about.
I really love that. I think that gives people hope that, like you said, it's not something you're born with. It's something that you can progress in yourself and work on yourself and build. And I love how you mentioned it's just like trusting yourself, that confidence. So a question kind of came up in my head as you were talking about that. So let's say somebody had just been through a lot and it really kind of dug them down into the ground and they're not feeling well about their self-worth. They're not doing well with their confidence. What would you advise someone to kind of bring them back up? Would you just let them kind of take time, or is there some things that they can do right away? How would you go about that?
So, so many things come to my mind right now. First and foremost, if if I am the first line of defense after someone has gone through something intense, traumatic, or anything of the sort that's really lowered their confidence, lowered their worth, they're really feeling down about themselves, my first line of defense is I have to meet them where they're at and be the listening ear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if this person is facing something where they're already feeling unworthy, what I absolutely have to do is make sure that they know that I'm here listening to them. So making sure I am really, really, really getting there with that person as their listening ear.
Mm-hmm.
We need to build that trust in order to then work on the next steps. So depending on the situation from there, there's a few things that could happen. There's something that I call human limits, and human limits are really when we come up against something that has either expanded our capacity past what that capacity is, almost like a balloon popping, or expanded our capacity so much that there's just no room for anything else. Human limits can be things like trauma, bereavement, so loss of a family member,
Hmm.
friend, or loved one, um, uh, really intense breakups, divorce. Human limits, I qualify as these major life moments where when they happen, they shake us up so much that we just don't have capacity for anything else in our life.
Right.
So, if we're working with a human limit that has really sort of broken down someone's confidence or worth, time is going to be a huge factor in that. You can't push someone back. We can't just put the balloon back together.
Right.
So we really need to be aware that time is going to be our best friend in that. Please, I didn't know if you were going to
Oh,
say
oh
something.
yeah. Let me say something real quick.
Yeah.
That's something I've learned recently with my mom because she, um, her her parents recently passed within the past year and a half, and it's just something that she needed to go through the grieving process, and she's still going through it. And me being over here, I'm always pretty positive, and I was really trying to help her. And then I came to realize I'm like, this is something she just needs time on because, like you just mentioned, it's a big thing. It's a big traumatic thing that just happened in her life. You can't just put everything back together just like that. You can't do that. So, it's just definitely something I just learned. It's like with things like that, you need to give time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's time is always going to be one of the largest factors in the healing process and in the growth process in general. But if we're not dealing with something that is necessarily a human limit, and this would come if it is someone who's reached a human limit, this would kind of come after they've sort of experienced that time that they needed to just step back and take a breath and rest and such. Then we would start working on what the next steps are. And these next steps would be step one for someone who might not be dealing with a human limit, but who might have not gotten the job of their dreams or
Right.
that interview that like they were gunning for and they really wanted. Then we would start here. So human limit, time, then this starting point, non-human limit, we start here. And that start here place is it's a reverse engineering process. It's an understanding of where you're at now, where you want to be, and then asking the right questions to get you from this place, breaking it down, reverse engineering to where you're at now.
Mm-hmm.
So, if for as far as confidence and worth, you didn't get the job that you thought you were going to get, and you are just depleted, you feel low, you're not confident in yourself, you feel like your worth is shot because you were banking on this position was a huge part of your identity. And when you don't have your identity, you feel like something is stripped from you.
Right.
So you start asking questions first. And this is really the coach in me. It's all about asking the right questions. What are you feeling right now? What do you want to be feeling? What did you believe you would be feeling? Okay, how do we get from where you're at here to where you want to be here? First, we need to understand that this is incremental. We won't get from point A to point B immediately. We're going to get from point A to point B in every single moment. It's a moment to moment to moment process. And then we start to build those skills in the moment to moment to moment process. So if we're working on worth and this person is saying, I want to feel more worthy. I want to feel like I am worth X. Uh, there could be problems in that statement in general, especially depending on how we define worth and should we be comparing our worthiness to other things. But
Mm-hmm.
often this is how people view worth. And we also have to work in the language of those who we're working with. So if someone wants to feel worthy of X, then we then start to break it down. Well, what would that look like?
Right.
Okay, so if it looks like that, how might someone reach that point? Okay, so you know how to reach that point. How much time is it going to take to reach that point? Okay, we know how much time. What are we going to have to do in that time to reach that point? So you really break it down, um, from the large, what I want, what this person wants, to the very, very small moment to moment to moment. This is how we practice that. This
Hmm.
is how you start to feel that worth. This is how you are going to continue to increase your confidence to feel like you want to be in X amount of time.
Right, Brie, I love that. It's something that I worked with a business coach last year, a life coach, and she, just like you, it's like you have to ask yourself those important questions. And I'm curious, like, what does that do when we really look at it? Like, let's say we lost that, we didn't get that job, and then you have to ask yourself those key questions for yourself. What does that do for us, like just as people, to help us like progress and get our confidence back?
So I think when we break it down into the smallest moments possible, what that does for us is that allows the intangible to become tangible.
Hmm.
So we see these big words, these big concepts, like we're talking about worth and confidence, as this beam of light or this shining star that is so far away, that it just seems so unreachable and so unattainable. So asking those questions really secures the mindset. It
Hmm.
helps us understand exactly where we're oriented to the thing that we're trying to get to, and then breaking it down to the smallest possible increments, those moment to moment to moment moments, uh, is what makes it feel possible and
Right.
attainable.
Right. That makes sense. It makes it, just like you mentioned, obtainable and not so far to the reach. Right. It makes it so you can actually move on to the next thing. And what do I need to do now? What do I need to do now? So I really love that, Bree. So my next question is, basically, what is self worth? Because when I just kind of looked it up, a lot of people look up like self esteem and self worth. Is there a difference between the two? And what exactly is self worth?
I think that's another awesome question. So, esteem and worth can get very murky. A lot of people will use them interchangeably, which I guess depending on how you might be using them, they could be used interchangeably. Um, but it does again come back to confidence. But worth is, for me, I believe that worth is self worth is much larger, more of a larger umbrella term than esteem. I believe that worth is just a self worth is a full confidence in who you are, what you're doing, what your abilities are,
Hmm.
um, how you are oriented in the world. Just a full confidence in knowing that you are worthy of whatever it is that comes your way.
Hmm.
So that sort of wholehearted self worth is bringing it back a little bit, not comparing your worthiness to other things or other people, but a full understanding that your worthiness is far beyond the physical things that we might try to compare to.
Hmm.
Worthiness is really an understanding of how spectacular you are,
Hmm.
how uniquely special and individual you are in this world. That's self worth. Self esteem, I bring down just a level below that umbrella, because self esteem, I feel like, is how we orient our worth within groups or within relationships and amongst others. So, sort of how we demonstrate how worthy we feel within within a physical context.
Hmm.
So, self esteem is much more if we don't have a full sense of self-worth, then our self-esteem is going to be lowered, which is going to affect how we interact with others and interact with the world. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It does make sense. And it kind of, I have a question that kind of leads into speaking about self worth. Someone asked from the community, they said, um, am I worth having self worth? And that was an interesting question. I had a hard time thinking about that question, but I was just wondering what you think about that. Am I worth having self worth?
I mean, my gosh, what a powerful question. A question that my heart is going out to this person in your community too, because the answer is unequivocally yes. The answer is that everyone is worthy of having self-worth. And when I think of someone maybe asking about that, uh, that's coming from a place of um, maybe not feeling that there is any worth at all around them or in their lives. And I don't want to make assumptions, but when I think about someone sort of layering it in that way, am I worth having self-worth? That is pushing into a place of um, questioning their whole being and
Mm-hmm.
questioning their whole character. Uh, the short answer is yes, and I want to put that out so strongly and clearly to this community member. It's yes, you are. Everyone is worthy of having that, but not only are you worthy of having it, you are entitled to it. This is a birthright. This is something that you are deserving of. You don't need to question if you're worthy of it or deserving of it. You are inherently, by being a human being, you are entitled to have not just any self-worth or any self-esteem or any level of confidence, but the one that makes you feel fulfilled and whole and centered. Everyone deserves that. That is everyone's right. That is everyone's birthright, is the best way to put it. Like, you're born to be able to feel to feel that security in yourself. So yes, you
Thank you,
are
Bree,
worthy.
for setting that straight and
Mhm.
sharing that, because I'm sure if the person who sees that will feel better after hearing that. But so a question that kind of leads into that is, how can I help a friend who may be struggling with self worth and confidence? What can I say to them? What can I do for them to kind of help them out?
Another great question. Um, First, I mean, being a friend is the first step. Or even if it's a coworker, if you have someone who's coming to you to talk to you about a topic like this, uh, first and foremost, that's sacred, because we as human beings have a really difficult time being vulnerable, and especially being vulnerable with our feelings and our emotions. So if someone does come to you about, feeling down on their worth or their confidence or who they are, um, take know what a sensitive and delicate and sacred moment that is, because that means that that person is coming to you with an element of trust
Mm-hmm.
that they might not be going to anyone else with. So and I think when we position ourselves in that place, in understanding the delicacy of the situation, it softens us, and that is a hope for anyone who might be the friend. Um, you want to be able to be softened to that situation. And the best advice I can give from there is, uh, it's not that saying you'll be okay is wrong. It's just not the best way to support the person in that
Mm-hmm.
time. Some people might be looking for that. And I think as the friend, you can often sense if they are looking for you to just say, just tell me I'll be okay. Like, tell me and sometimes that is what people need, and sometimes they will blatantly ask for it. Like, I'm asking you to help me and tell me I'll be okay, and if
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're asking for, that's okay. But if they're coming to you with a sensitive subject about who they are and how they're feeling, really becoming that empathetic human being, um, not just the sympathetic one. So the sympathetic one is the person who might stand on the outside and say, hey, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm not here with you. The empathetic person brings themselves there in that dark space too, and they
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm hearing you and I'm here with you. And with that language, uh, the advice is being there with them,
Mm-hmm.
doing your best, even if you have not experienced that situation, because many of us have not. We're humans. We have individual and unique and complex experiences. So often we can't say that I've had that exact same situation. But what we probably have had is deep sorrow or deep insecurity or deep pain. And by tapping into our understanding of what that felt like for us,
Right.
that opens that empathy door. That says, I'm here with you. I can't imagine what you're going through, but I'm feeling that pain deeply with you, and I will do what I can to support you. So we're not, people aren't necessarily looking for solutions. You don't have to say it'll be okay. But if you do
Right.
say, I'm here supporting you, I'm here with you, uh, that's that moment to moment to moment piece that I'm talking about. That is getting there in the trenches, and being able to be the present person that they're looking for, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the solution focused person that they're looking for.
Right. And very good points. And like you mentioned, just being there for them, and maybe if you haven't gone through that, at least trying to understand like what they're going through. And would you say like trying to kind of imagine if it were to happen to you, so you can kind of try and feel it, or just at least being with them is just very helpful?
It really depends on the situation. They might want you to imagine with them, and so in all of these situations, the person with the experience is the leader. They are the guide in this partnership or this relationship right now.
Mm-hmm.
If they're coming to you and they took that initiative, then allow them to lead you through it. Again, we don't have to provide solutions, but if they say, can you imagine? Like, just think about that. Have you ever been in this situation? If they're looking for that, then you can do that. But it really is all about just opening your ears as big as you can open them to really hear and feel and experience, because those are the human parts about us that don't actually need language. A person can feel if you're feeling with them.
Right.
That's one of those, almost like an unknown part of human nature. Like, you can just feel if someone is really there supporting you, whether they're speaking or not. So allow that person to be the guide in that situation. Really listen to them. Really just be present with them,
Mm-hmm.
and let them tell you what they need. And I can almost guarantee those answers will come. And if those answers don't come, then the question that is so okay to ask in that moment is, what do you need and how can I help with that?
Mm-hmm. I really
What can
like.
I, yeah.
Go ahead, Bree. We're gonna finish.
No, yeah, no, it's just, what can I do to help you get there? What,
Mm-hmm.
exactly, what do you need and how can I help you?
Right. I like that. And I like what you mentioned is like, we don't have to provide a solution. So to help someone out, you don't have to be like, oh, here's what you can do to feel better. Sometimes what they need is just you to be there with them, to kind of feel the emotion with them. So I really like that, Brie. That was really good there. This might be a kind of a silly question, But why
No
do
silly
people?
questions.
Well, wait till you hear it. Why do people lack confidence and self worth? Like, why? I guess why is that a thing? Why do we go through this range of emotions with self worth and confidence?
So I love this question so much because it is a huge part of my research and what I work on. I do a ton of work in limiting beliefs in and the way that we speak to ourselves and how that plays into how we move about and orient ourselves in the world. But interestingly enough, most of the reasons why we feel, act, believe, portray, and do the things that we do um, is deep in our history, not necessarily here in front of us. So it's not necessarily the situations that are happening now. The way that I like to describe it is that we are a fabric of the trillions and zillions of interactions, thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs that we've had our whole lives. So when you think of yourself as a fabric, every belief, every thought, every interaction, every moment becomes a thread in that fabric. And when we start to thread the fabric together, that starts to become the fabric of our being. So confidence and self-worth are going all the way back to young us before we might even be able to remember, um, based on so many things. Again, our environment, our familial situation, the way that we were raised by our parents and our families, the way that they spoke. This could be coming even from before us because there are things like intergenerational trauma
Mm-hmm.
where if parents or loved ones who have experienced trauma themselves have not healed through those experiences, and this doesn't necessarily have to be trauma or even big T trauma, and we use like big T and little t trauma just as a little bit of a scale, but it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
even have to be big T trauma. It can just be if a parent is coming in with lacking confidence or worth, uh, that then can be, pushed on or conditioned into the child.
Mm-hmm.
That's what conditioned behaviors are. If the parent is doesn't have confidence, and the child learns that because we're sponges when we're children. We take in everything from our environment. So those who might be struggling now, uh, it and again, I'm doing this research as we speak, but it comes from digging deep into our past. There could be a big moment where things might have fallen apart, but there's always going to be the combination of the trillions and trillions of micro moments that we, again, conditioned behavior is just we learn something when we are that little sponge,
Mm-hmm.
and then we continue to act out that same behavior that we learned because that's what we knew. And once you act it out so many times, again, trillions of times, because we're having trillions of actions, interactions, and reactions. So if you continue to act out on those micro moments, lack of confidence, lack of confidence, lack of confidence, that will compound, and that will really bring us to today and how we feel about ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
how we move about the world.
So, Bri, that's I've never really thought about it like that, but it totally makes sense. So, my next question is, how do we kind of recondition our brain to kind of letting the past be and kind of moving on and building up that confidence and self worth? And also, it can kind of tie into a question of like, what are some tips that I can kind of work on right now? Like today, I can start doing this to build up my confidence and self worth.
Such great questions. Okay, so so first, how do we sort of decondition ourselves? How do we step out of that past self that we feel so sort of boxed up in?
Mhm.
This goes back to the practice part, how I said that these are skills that we can practice. So we will get into those. What can you do right now? But a huge step is being able to confront these pieces as they arise. So uh, we know that we can't go back in history. We can't go back in time as our conscious functioning selves in say, wait a second, I want to have confidence. Don't tell me I can't do something, because that's what happened, and that is the fabric of our being. And
Mhm.
that is also now being used as a strength, because um, the fabric of your being is not only in your confidence and in your worth, but it's in everything that you've learned, in everything that you have experienced and grown with as well. So um, there's no way to really decondition or uncondition ourselves, but there is a confrontation piece that comes about. So specifically, I find that people who are dealing with low confidence, low self esteem, low self worth are also dealing with massive negative self talk.
Mhm.
They really go hand in hand. And like I said, that's the limiting beliefs is a huge part of what I study, what I speak on, and what I teach. So what we need to do now is every time we need to sort of turn our conscious selves on and start making ourselves aware of the way that we speak to ourselves.
Mhm.
This is going to take time, okay? But first, we need to start recognizing that we are speaking to ourselves in a way that does not serve us. It might have served us back then. It when someone told me that I couldn't back when I was 5 years old, it served me to say, I guess I can't, in my head, because I was a child and I didn't think that I could push back against an authority figure.
Mhm.
So it served me to stay in that place. Again, conditioned behavior that no longer serves us. It
Mhm.
no longer serves us to continue to tell yourself you can't if you're no longer in a place that that is the scenario taking place. So really recognizing, putting on our conscious selves, recognizing moment to moment when we are not being um, gentle or kind or encouraging to ourselves. Unfortunately, for many of us, all of us for sure have this negative self talk, but many of us are doing this constantly throughout the day.
Mhm.
I mean, constantly we are battling ourselves for ourselves. So it's very counterintuitive. So step number one is we have to just become aware. If for you that means if you're learning in this moment right now that you even talk to yourself, and now knowing that you talk to yourself negatively, because some of us don't realize it, and that's okay. But if you're now learning that you actually, in fact, do have this dialogue, because every person does, the human being we speak to most in our lives is ourselves, believe it or not.
Mhm.
So if you are just realizing this, I ask you for your step one is to continue to realize it, because a lot of times we let it pop into our consciousness and then we let it fall back.
Mhm.
Step one is you don't let it fall back. So when these moments, and there might be hundreds to thousands of times that we have these micro speaking moments to ourselves in a day, start recognizing them.
Mhm.
If you're past the point of recognizing them, second step is to start writing them down. Okay. Uh, the reason why is because once we put something on paper, without getting too scientific, it's making something more real. So if we have a list that says ways I speak to myself that are not helpful for my well-being, or whatever you want to do, and then you start writing those things down, I can almost guarantee that when you start writing them down, you're going to be able to look back at them and realize how untrue they are. There is this sense of realization, this sense of, I can't believe this. I can't
Mm-hmm.
believe this is how I was treating myself. Again, we don't realize it. We're so unaware of the way that we treat ourselves. We can go above and beyond to treat others with kindness and greatness and dignity and respect. And we don't do the same for ourselves, but often it's because we're not aware. So I encourage people to write it down. If you have not, if you don't have that moment after writing it down, maybe for you, you want to do it over the course of a week, maybe over the course of a month, maybe it's just in that one day. But after you write it down, if you look at it and you don't, and you say, I do feel this way about myself, this all still feels true, then we need to do a few other things. So the first would be flipping the script. I encourage you to look at that script, literally, that you've been telling yourself, and say, would I tell my best friend these things? Would I speak to the people that I care about most in this way?
Mm-hmm.
That really, again, helps us do that mindset shift, because that's what we're working on. We can't just start implementing tools and techniques and strategies if we don't actually feel it and believe it. So these first several sets of steps are getting you to to understand that first there's a problem here. The problem is that I'm not treating myself fairly,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not that we can't have confidence, it's that we're telling ourselves we can't. And that is, so understanding, confronting the way that we are treating ourselves is step number one, tool number one. Taking inventory, writing it down, mulling it over, understanding what the problem is. We can then, again, this would be done through coaching or counseling, but with me at least, and this is things people can do on their own, but we then start to pull out themes. What are the themes here? Are they are the themes around your ability? Are the themes around your physical appearance? Are the themes around how you are as a parent or as a partner? Are the themes, what are those themes around? Because we need to really pinpoint the problem to get to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
So if we pick out themes, that makes it a lot easier for us to rewind in time, understand maybe where those micro moments started, and then start to break the patterns.
Mm-hmm. I love all that, Bri. You brought up a good point about like how we don't really treat ourselves as kind and loving, and um, we don't admire ourselves as much as we do others. And um, I kind of sometimes go through this with myself where I pretend I'm outside of myself, and I would say, what would I tell myself in this situation? Instead of beating myself down, if I stepped away and I acted like I was a different person, what advice would I give to myself? And it's turning that kind of negative self-talk into identifying that negative self-talk and turning it into, positive. Okay, let's think logical, like what's the best way to go about that. So I really love that, and I think it's a tough thing to um, do, but I think, like you said, identifying it and then that constant practice of identifying it and not letting it control you, I guess, that negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bri. So I kind of have a last question to kind of wrap up the show here. So what you said a lot of good advice, but what, I guess, final advice would you have, or the one big takeaway for building up your confidence, your self-esteem, your self-worth, all of that intertwined?
This might be my favorite question. I know I'm speaking both concrete and abstract, so there can be a lot of pieces that you might need to put together to make the best package for you that makes the most sense to build up who you are and break down who you were. But something that is really important to me, and I think makes so much sense in offering people advice in this space, is actually defining what agency is, or self-efficacy is very close. I can give you the definitions, but um, agency is our belief in ourselves that we can. Um, Let me just make sure here, Max. I
Did it
think
go
he might.
blank?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think he
that's
might have
okay.
froze.
Something you can still hear me though?
Yes.
Okay, we'll
Yes.
keep it going. Something with the camera, it might have died, but we'll just go ahead and keep it going.
Okay, no problem. So that's just as well. Um, so agency and self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is really the belief in your ability to execute things in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And agency is really the realization that you can in general. So efficacy is really about knowing that you can execute and do things and make things happen and change things in your world. And agency is really, think of it as like an overarching belief in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And these two pieces are hugely, hugely, hugely important, especially with confidence and self-worth. The mantra or tagline, if you will, that I've made for my business is to buy into the possibility of you. That
Mm-hmm.
means that before you can cultivate confidence or cultivate that worth, you just need to know that you can. You need to have the you need to be able to find it deep within you, because everyone has it. So that's where I can be so sure everyone has this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just finding it. So it's buying into the possibility of what is outside your peripherals, buying into the fact that though you are not there yet, you know you can get there.
Mm-hmm.
If people are able to start here with this fraction of a millimeter of a step, to just say, I know I'm not there, but I know I can, it will change the game.
Mm-hmm.
From there, again, building confidence and building worth are skills that we can cultivate, and there are tools to cultivate them. I encourage everyone to concentrate on the micro moments, on the moment to moment to moment of how can I be my most confident self here? How can I um, how can I feel worthy in this moment? And it is different for everyone how they might get there in those moments, but we need to break it down. We need to have a strong understanding in the fact that we can, and we need to continue to practice as if we already are.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we'll continue to fumble because we're human beings. I fumble often. I am a human being. There are days when I just, do not feel like the most confident version of myself for
Right.
whatever reason. Maybe something happened here, or maybe something happened there. What I do want to make the distinguishing, what I do want to distinguish is that I always wake up with the self-worth of knowing that I am worthy of this life that I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that, though getting to that worth can be cultivated, once you're there, uh, it's almost like a much larger understanding of yourself. And confidence is sort of like the piece right below self-worth that we use to continue to um, feel. So I don't know if that made a ton of sense,
No,
but
it did, Bri. You said a lot of good stuff there, and I appreciate it so much. If so that's a wrap, guys. That was our first show with Bri. And Bri, I'm gonna butcher your last name. Can you tell me one more time?
that's okay. Tartaglione.
Tartaglione. Okay, so Bri, if anybody wants to go learn more about you and maybe even reach out to you, your website is Bri undeniably.com.
That's it.
Okay.
So yeah, anyone can find me, briundeniably.com. If you type in Bri Undeniably anywhere, you're going to find me. My Instagram at Bri_undeniably. You're also going to find links to everything through my website, through my Instagram. So pretty easy to catch me. I would love to chat with any listeners if they reach out. They will also get a free consultation that I will do. So anyone can go to my website and look into that as well.
Awesome, and I'll go ahead and put it all in the description of the video here. So Bri, if you could hang on just a second, I'm gonna after I end the recording. But I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up and say goodbye to everyone who's watching. So thank you again, Bri, for joining, and to everyone watching, we'll see you guys next. I think we're gonna be doing this every Tuesday, so I'll have the live shows on Thursday, or I might move them to Friday, and we'll be doing a remote show every Tuesday. So thank you everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next Tuesday.